All right, welcome, guys. We've got an exciting interview for you lined up tonight. You're going to have to give me a few minutes here because I've got to actually dial out to her. So let's see here. We are going to dial out. Bear with me, if you would, for just a few minutes while I man the switchboard and get this going. All right, so we've got... Okay. All right, we are dialing into Leuren Moret, and she is our guest for the evening. She's not feeling well. Hopefully she can stay for the whole time. She may have to cut it short, but that's okay. We'll still wing it because that's what we do here at Freedomizer. All right, looks like we have a geoscientist tonight to discuss nukes and depleted uranium. She's got some shocking information, so hold on tight.
Hello.
Hi, Leuren. This is Valerie.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. We have you on the air, and I let everybody know that you may not be able to stay the entire time because you're not feeling well. However,
Right.
so we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm just going to let you introduce yourself and give a little bit of your bio, and then we can just kind of go from there. And
Okay.
if you start getting feeling bad, just let me know, okay?
Okay, great.
Okay.
My name is Leuren Moret. I'm a geoscientist, and I have worked on all over the world. I've been in 50 countries. I got interested in the radiation issue in the year 2000 after I visited Japan and went to Hiroshima and Nagasaki and realized what nuclear weapons had done. I worked in 2 nuclear weapons labs, the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, which is where the Manhattan Project started, and for World War II, and at the Lawrence Livermore Nuclear Weapons Lab much later in the 1989 to 91. And I became a whistleblower there. I put everything in my office in my car one day and drove out the gate and never went back. And that sure did change my life. But in the year 2000, I was invited to Hiroshima and Nagasaki to the memorial ceremonies. And when I was in the peace museums in Hiroshima and I saw a model of the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima, I started crying, and I had all these TV cameras in my face. They'd never had a nuclear weapons lab whistleblower visit Japan before. And I was sobbing for 20 minutes for the half of the press conference. I just couldn't stop because I said, scientists made those bombs possible. And then I went to Nagasaki, and each of the museums are different, but they commemorate the tragedy of those 2 days. And in the Nagasaki Museum, I saw photos of a very young mother with her kimono open. It was an hour after the nuclear bomb. Her hair was messed up. Her baby, she was holding a dying baby and nursing it. And I just said, that could be me. That could be any young mother around the world. And I just have to work on this issue the rest of my life. And having a geoscience background was very, very helpful because I started mapping disease, and I started realizing it's related to the environment and environmental processes that spread poisons in our environment, especially radiation, around the world. And that's how I started mapping disease and writing for the Internet and doing interviews and putting them on the Internet. And I started putting films on community access stations that you could never even get onto television anywhere, anytime, anyhow. And then I ended up doing 20 speaking tours of Japan after 2000. And in 2004, I wrote a very prophetic article for the Japan Times called Japan's Deadly Game of Nuclear Roulette. And anyone listening tonight can do a search on the internet, Japan's Deadly Game of Nuclear Roulette, and I exactly predicted what has just happened at Fukushima.
Wow. So, bring us up to date with your findings and things that you know surrounding this last quake in Japan, the Fukushima site.
Well, I'm not sure how much the audience knows about the Cold War and the weapons that were developed during the Cold War. But and I certainly didn't know when I was working at Livermore. I didn't even know what a nuclear bomb was, believe it or not. But I began investigating many things after I went to Japan. I started to really wake up, and I really love people. And for 8 years I was in total denial that they could be using bombs and radiation and contaminated milk from dairies around nuclear power plants to deliberately depopulate our country and other countries. And finally, after 8 years, I finally said, this can't be an accident. It's impossible. This is deliberate. And so I forgot the question.
I was just want to know, I know that we understand, our listeners here at Freedomize understand that the mainstream media does not cover the real news.
Reporting, yes.
Right.
So what happened is, during the Cold War, since the Manhattan Project was over, and the product of the Manhattan Project was the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs and a whole new nuclear weapons program, but nuclear weapons are inconvenient because they contaminate your own country, your own people, your own soldiers. So under the cover of the Cold War, the Soviet Union and the United States government jointly developed in great secrecy a new weapon of mass destruction, and they used Star Wars and national missile defense and ballistic missile defense to be the cover story. And this new weapon was developed at Livermore. The Soviets would come to Livermore Nuclear Weapons Lab, which is about 45 miles southeast of San Francisco, and a team from the Livermore lab called the Woodpecker Project would go with the Soviets to the Soviet Union, and so they were going back and forth jointly developing this new weapon system. And what they wanted to do was study the ionosphere, the upper atmosphere, but there's no way to study it except by injecting large amounts of very, very highly charged particles up there and watching how they behave in the Van Allen belts, which are the magnetic field lines of the Earth's magnetic field. And so that's why there were so many nuclear bomb tests, and that's why the Soviets went to the Arctic to do their hydrogen bomb tests, which were huge. And so that's how this new weapon system called HARP was developed. And basically, it's a huge antenna array. We have one in Gakona, Alaska. England has them. Russia has them. And now I know that Japan and China have them as well. And these are located around the world, and nobody knew what they were for. The cover story was that it was for doing experimental astronomy or understanding the atmosphere of the planet or whatever. And I began to investigate, and I discovered that it was a new generation of weapon of mass destruction. And what they were doing was using these huge antenna arrays, and the Gakona, Alaska one transmits over 1 billion watts. It's a huge, 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 very powerful antenna. And what they're doing is they can do tectonic warfare. In other words, they can trigger earthquakes. So the Fukushima earthquake, we now know, was triggered by HAARP. They also used it for the Haiti earthquake a year and a half ago. The Kashmir earthquake, the Kobe earthquake in Japan, the Sumatra earthquake in the Indian Ocean. These are all HAARP-triggered earthquakes. And usually this weapon of mass destruction is used to release the huge amount of energy in natural parts of the environment, such as the energy that builds up along a fault line. Mm-hmm. And so when we triggered, the Navy's in charge, by the way. So when the Fukushima earthquake was triggered, and I now have from the MIT Technology Review Journal, they have the images that show 5 days before that earthquake, they began heating up parts of the earthquake to destabilize it and to increase the amount of energy locked up in it, increase the stress. And on the 5th day, that earthquake popped. Well, I have the satellite data for 5 geosynchronous Los Alamos satellites for the Kashmir earthquake, and they did the same thing. So now we're beginning to collect information, for instance, from the tornado storms in the south. Well, there was a foreshadowing event in 1999 in Oklahoma, and the tip-off for understanding or being able to say confidently that it's a HAARP event is when the magnitude of the energy released or the speed of the winds in the tornado or the size of the tornado, when these things have never been reported before in a natural phenomena, then it's indicating it's probably a HAARP event. The tornadoes that were released in or that were created in Oklahoma in 1999, oddly enough, they traveled in a straight line from southwest to northeast, parallel to each other, and also parallel to major highways and freeways. And the one that went towards Oklahoma City, normal tornadoes, about 100 miles an hour, the winds are inside it. That one had winds that were 300 miles an hour. That's 3 times normal. And instead of being maybe 1,200 feet across in diameter, it was a mile across, bigger than a mile. And so that was three times bigger than any tornadoes that had been reported before. And guess what it did, Val?
What?
It went in a straight line until it got to Tinker Air Force Base, and it went around Tinker Air Force Base.
Oh, my gosh.
Tornadoes don't go around cities and around military bases.
So they have technology to actually control these things.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And the going back to the tornadoes in the south. So then I started getting NASA maps and images of those tornadoes, and they have. It's wonderful because they now have animated maps that you can watch over a 2 or 3 or 5 day period, and that's how you get the clues about whether it's natural or whether it's man-made. And so I got that map, and I watched it about 5 times, and guess what?
What?
The tornadoes were exactly on the same track as the 1999 tornadoes in Oklahoma. They were from southwest to northeast. They paralleled major freeways and highways, and they were on that same track all the way up from Louisiana up into New York State.
You know what? Is it Leuren or Lauren?
It's Leuren.
Leuren, okay. Leuren,
Yeah.
it's interesting that you say this tracking thing and finding patterns. And this may be off a little bit of subject, but I was doing some research on, a few months back we had all these different wildlife, birds and fish and sea life just dying in the thousands. And so what I've done was I took a map. Yeah, well, listen to this. This is where it gets freaky. I took a map. Somebody did a great job on the Google Maps, and they put the little blue bubble on where they found mass animals and deaths. And then you laid down, if you laid down the North Atlantic Current, okay, and Lord Sterling said that the North Atlantic Current is disappearing, and all these deaths were the majority of them were along that current, and that's just amazing to me.
Oh, I want more of that information. It's recognizing patterns and having a long history of working in the geosciences and understanding natural history that has made me able to reveal so much, to understand so much, expose so much about HAARP. If I had not had a very extensive background in the geosciences and traveled so much to so many countries, observing all these natural phenomenon, I wouldn't know a HAARP event from a normal event, a natural event.
Now, can you settle? There's a debate out there going on about. There's a lot of misunderstandings about HAARP, and maybe you can help clear this up. Now, there's a big debate saying that HAARP has no way to. They don't have the ability to create earthquakes. It's more of an ionosphere type thing, but it doesn't have anything to do with earthquakes. Is that true or false?
Oh, well, first of all, that's an opinion.
Okay.
And everyone is entitled to their opinion. But opinion is not science. Science is something very different that has to be argued, it has to be proven, it has to have a hypothesis, and people discussing their ideas. And in that interaction of exchanging ideas and having opinions about what it is, that's when the truth emerges, because it's the person with the scientific explanation that makes sense and meets the constraints of science. In other words, the constraints in science tell you what is scientifically, physically possible and what is not. And so most people don't have a scientific background, and so they're trying to figure out very, very complex processes with deep time. I mean, geoscientists go back 14 billion years. The only other discipline that has that deep science dimension is astrophysics. So people are trying to figure out science that has so much complexities, and there's systems within systems within systems, and they're trying to figure it out with what they know in their own lives, and you just can't do it. You have to be a specialist in that field.
Okay, so
but,
basically,
but
go ahead.
if someone, a scientist, like I'm a citizen scientist, and I want people to understand what is happening, they paid for all that research, and they're entitled to understand it, to use it, to know it, to enjoy it, to do their own research. And so I show them how. And what I do is I take very, very complex ideas and systems and whatever, and I simplify it. I make it very simple so that people can understand it, and it's all just common sense. Okay. But most scientists are social rejects. They can't make it in a normal social environment. They go into science or into academia because they can take a mountain or a volcano or a fault zone and make it theirs and make their living the rest of their lives on their little molehill. And so in science, a particular scientist will control and do the research on one volcano his whole life, or a certain kind of dinosaur, or, whatever, the moon, or whatever. And so they're very, very, very narrowly specialized, and they have a language that prohibits others from participating in their research. It's a way of protecting their fiefdom. And so it does keep people out of understanding, or away from understanding things that are just in the natural world. And if you go and spend time with indigenous people, they're the best scientists in the world. It's just they don't have educations, but they're out there observing it every day. And the best example I can think of are the Pacific Islanders, who they're the greatest, absolutely the greatest explorers in the history of the world. And they got into little canoes in Taiwan or on the coast of China there, and they put pigs and sweet potatoes and taro root into those canoes. And it took them 5,000 years, but they settled the whole entire Pacific Ocean.
Wow. So in your own words, tell us why. I mean, that's the biggest thing is there's a lot of conspiracies out there. There's a lot of this solid information out there. Why are they doing this?
Well, first of all, let me tell the history of HAARP.
Okay.
Dr. Bernard Eastlund was a scientist for ARCO Corporation, the oil company. Mm-hmm. And he was working on different kinds of projects, and they wanted him to develop some kind of a technology that they could do from space to do subsurface mineral exploration. So, in other words, they wanted to go to use satellites to look underground to find oil deposits, gas deposits, gold deposits, things like that. Mm-hmm. And so he developed this hypothesis and needed these nuclear bomb tests to help them study the structure and the character of the upper atmosphere, the ionosphere. That was the only way to do it, and the Earth's magnetic field. And so the Soviets and the U.S. government did all those bomb tests. That was the beginning. Then the development of the antenna started. That was in the Soviet Union, and they still have the 7 biggest HAARP transmitters in the world, and Chernobyl was at one of them. Chernobyl powered one of their 7 huge transmitters. And so in the early 1970s, the town of Medford, Oregon, overnight had an epidemic of suicides. Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't. Explain that.
Overnight, all kinds of people started committing suicide. So a professor at a university nearby began investigating, and he eliminated everything. He had a team working with him. And finally, they started checking radio transmissions in the area, and they found a strange signal. So he said, "Well, we're going to go to the military base nearby, and we're going to meet with the commander." So he took his team to the military base. They met with the commander. They explained what they'd found, and they said, "Do you know anything about it?" And the commander said, "Oh, yeah, I know about it." He said, "But we're not transmitting that. The Soviets are transmitting it over Medford." And it was called it was called the woodpecker signal. And
when was this?
Early 1970s.
Okay, go ahead.
And so people were committing suicide like crazy and acting strange and everything. And Another thing is that Klamath Falls is a witchcraft center, and it's very close to Medford. Now, the U.S. military set up something called Gwen Towers, ground
Okay, I know
wave
about that. Yes.
emergency network, and they were transmitting these frequencies from those Gwen Towers. They're ELF towers, extra low frequency. These are very, very long wavelengths, and what they do is they just put the mind control frequency on the carrier wave. The ELF wave is the carrier wave, and they can have it carry any frequencies they want to. It's just the delivery bus.
Mm-hmm.
So the military said, oh, we've got to have these Gwen Towers all over the U.S. because this is how we can transmit to submarines and communicate with submarines. Well, Gwen Towers, Val, only transmit 200 miles.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you put them in the middle of the United States or in the middle of California or on the Oregon border near Medford if you're going to be transmitting to submarines? Submarines are way out in the oceans. And so they were never for submarines. They were for mind control and weather modification and whatever else they want to use them for.
Now,
So,
I did some research on those ELF waves and learned that there's a certain decibel that they can, or megahertz or something like that, that they can shoot into That's it, frequencies. And if it's a certain level, they actually have been experimenting on populations, on mass populations, and they can cause civil unrest on a mass population with a certain number of frequency.
They've already done it. Let me tell you some of the applications.
Mm-hmm.
What I call it is Zionist science.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean is this is it's for the international financiers in the City of London and Wall Street. This is a British-U.S. alliance and project, and it's for, HARP was developed for missile defense, communications disruption, satellite submarine surveillance disruption, subsurface mineral exploration, rogue waves. These are waves that are over 100 feet high now. No ship in the world was ever built to survive a 100-foot wave. And 200 cargo ships have disappeared in the last 20 years. And it's rogue waves that just sunk them, and no one ever saw them or heard about them again. And isn't that a really good way to eliminate your competitors?
Wow.
It's also
total
for
control.
Total control, invisible total control. It's also for tectonic events like Fukushima. And what the tectonic events are for is to cause depopulation and also to cause transformations and also weather modification and, of course, mind control. Now,
okay,
the Fukushima...
Okay. I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
I just wanted to ask a question really quick. Now, Japan, do you believe it's strategically planned as far as even its position, knowing with the current, with the way?
Oh yes, they used all the natural
patterns.
processes and the current.
So the wind patterns. It takes, I think, it's 8 days for the wind of Japan to meet California. It takes 8 days, and so what is their motive with causing this Fukushima meltdown? What do you think that is?
Oh, okay. So that's what I was just going to explain, how they use this tectonic event. So what happened is there are characteristics of HARP events that are almost always, you can almost always find them if you investigate each event. Number one is foreshadowing. There is an event before the HARP event. It could be a month, a year, the day before, 5 years, but there is an event that is like the event that happens later that's much bigger or is more strategic.
Okay.
And there was an earthquake exactly on the other side of Japan from Fukushima at the same latitude, and it's called Niigata. And there was an earthquake there about 2 or 3 years ago, and it damaged the buildings and it caused some fires, but there was no release of radiation. However, it was the foreshadowing or the warning event. And another aspect of the fingerprint or the footprint of HAARP is that the events are at greater magnitudes than have been reported before. So a 9.0 or a 9.1 earthquake has never been reported in Japan since record-keeping started 150 years ago.
Right.
And that's very, very important because Japan has a magnitude 8 or greater earthquake every 5 years. So if they have that many earthquakes in 150 years, and none of them have been a 9 or a 9.1, then that indicates that perhaps this is a HAARP event. Then there is an economic benefit and the transformation I was talking about.
Okay.
So it takes a long, long time, decades, to set up each of these events. They're planned a long, long time ago. They have to have the right people in the government, in the regulatory agencies, the military, in the economic realm. It all has to be set up, the politicians, everything. So the Fukushima earthquake occurred on March 11th, which is 3/11. The World Trade Center and the Pentagon disaster happened on 9/11. And so the CIA, or whoever is planning this, they like to use anniversaries and numerologies and names and things like that. So this also has a numerology component to it, or aspect to it. So also, there's a transformation going on now in Asia, and Japan is the third largest economy in the world, and it's got 14 U.S. military bases on it. It's an occupied country. It's an occupied country because the U.S. has been running Japan since World War II, when MacArthur took over. We have 14 bases there, and we make the Japanese pay for us to be there. Our full cost, they get a bill every year. They get a letter that tells them what we want, and the Japanese government coughs up. And so we supposedly are there charging them for our military presence because we're protecting them from nuclear weapons in North Korea. That's a bunch of baloney. It's because we want to spy on China. We want to spy on Asia. We want to control the Pacific, and we want to control the Pacific shipping lanes, which is where all the energy comes from the Middle East, around Africa, or around India, and through Southeast Asia, through the Straits of Malacca in Malaysia, and then into the Southeast China Sea, and then into the Japan, Korea, China region. And so the transformation is not only in Asia now, because the Japanese have demanded for 10 years that we get our bases out of Japan. And we don't want to take our bases out of Japan. And so another transformation is the transformation of the North American unification. And so what the world bankers want to do, they unified Europe and created the European Union. They want to unify North America, Canada, the U.S., and Mexico into a regional area like the EU with a regional government and one currency. So that's what they're doing now, but they have to break down the cultures, they have to break down the structure, the infrastructure, they have to break down the health of people and make them weaker in order to bring about that transformation.
Okay, so you just hit on something that that just kind of struck in my mind. Breaking down their infrastructure, and that's cultural, that's ethnical, that's, I mean, on all levels. That's
all
the
levels.
one way to take away basically their unique identity as a people. And
exactly.
They want to usher in this world democracy like they're trying to do over in the Middle East. And do you think that that's their front runner, is all in the name of democracy? Under this guise of democracy, you find all these different countries and third world countries coming into what they think is democracy, but actually is a type of slavery and to the elite.
Well,
I don't know
course.
if that's way left field for you or if that seems to be kind of true and correct there.
Oh, no, you're completely and totally right. The U.S. has always had their doors open to immigrants because immigration is what pushes up the American workers and the American society higher and higher
right.
levels by bringing in more and more people at the bottom to do the slave labor. And so we've always operated based on slavery. It's absolutely true. Now, what they want to do now is to also take over all the world food supplies. So Kissinger said, he who controls the food controls a country. He who controls the energy controls a region. He who controls the money controls the world. And so they've got the money, Wall Street and the City of London. They have the region. That's why we're having all these wars in Central Asia and the Middle East. It's to stop any pipelines going overland from oil supplies in Iran or any of the Russian oil-rich republics in Central Asia or from India. They're blocking it all so that it can't go overland to China and Japan and Korea. And so it forces all of the energy supplies to go on by sea, and that's the route I was talking about past the Middle East and India and the South China Sea into Asia. And I was in Hawaii in 2007. I got 23 depleted uranium bills in one session of the legislature to stop depleted uranium in Hawaii, but I didn't do it. The military was so terrified of me when I went on TV with my Geiger counter, and I said, look, these are the readings I got today in Kona. And they were shooting depleted uranium today because the red flags were up on the base. And so they jammed the legislature with depleted uranium bills so that anything I proposed would be lost in a giant pot of soup. And anyway, so I was there when there was a command change in the Pacific, and Admiral Mullen, who's now the head of all the military in the U.S., was there, and Admiral Gary Roughead was the admiral leaving Hawaii, and a new one was coming in. And so when they have a big thing like that going on, a lot of stuff gets into the newspaper and they get interviewed. And sometimes they say a lot if you're paying attention. So I think it was Admiral Roughead who said, well, we are not interested in the Atlantic anymore. We are moving 95% of our ships and 95% of our personnel to the Pacific, because this is where everything is happening now. And they want to take over Hawaii. So Hawaii is part of the Fukushima disaster too, because what HAARP is about is land grabs. and energy wars and things like that. And so by triggering the Fukushima earthquake, they had GE reactors there. The USS Ronald Reagan was standing offshore when the Fukushima disaster happened. And there's usually a Navy ship, also another fingerprint of HAARP, standing offshore, Haiti, Hurricane Katrina, that Sumatra, that Navy ship is always there. And that Navy ship, the USS Ronald Reagan, is also part of the symbolism because the MOX fuel, the mixed oxide fuel, mixed uranium and plutonium oxide, which is very dangerous, it's very hot, it's very unstable, and the governor of that prefecture, Fukushima prefecture, had prohibited MOX fuel in his prefecture in 2002. And the governor of a prefecture has higher authority in his prefecture than the federal government. So, that third reactor, reactor number 3, had MOX secretly put in it in September. Nobody knew.
Oh, wow.
And the reason Ronald Reagan was the aircraft carrier sitting there, because after all we have 7 that we could send any of them, is because the Prime Minister of Japan, his name was Nakasone, in the early 1980s, he went to Washington, D.C. He was a Navy guy, and he made a secret agreement with President Ronald Reagan to bring MOX fuel to Japan. Now, that's what I mean about these HAARP events are set up decades ahead of time. And so the Ronald Reagan was sitting there, and what happened in the plant is that the Fukushima earthquake was a 9.1. A 9.0 earthquake, and I had the Manhattan Project scientist who made the hydrogen bomb work. I asked him to calculate for me how many nuclear bombs equivalent energy were released by the Fukushima earthquake. So he called me up and he said, well, I calculated it. It's 1,030,000 kiloton bombs the size of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Oh, my God.
And so what happened is the earthquake happened, and it destroyed all of the power lines to the plant. Let's see, 1 hour later, exactly 1 hour later, a 31-foot tsunami flooded the whole plant because almost all the nuclear power plants are built on the ocean in Japan. So they're like 10 or 20 feet above the ocean.
Right.
And so the workers in the plant were frantically trying to get the backup systems to work. They couldn't get the main one to work. That is located, the pump is located down on the beach. Why would you put your most important pump on the beach when a tsunami hits Japan all the time?
Oh,
so
my goodness.
they couldn't get that one to work because a new virus called the Stuxnet virus had been developed in 2007 at the Idaho Nuclear Engineering Lab. And these cyber viruses, the way this one worked, are more dangerous than nuclear bombs. And this virus, the Stuxnet virus, was designed by a team of U.S. They had to be extremely sophisticated because it was rocket science level software language and everything that wrote this, that was needed for this virus. And also a team from Siemens in Germany. It's a company that makes the controllers for the reactors that were in the Fukushima plant. They were at the Idaho Nuclear Engineering Lab in 2007 co-developing that code, that virus. And so they wrote the virus, and it was to sabotage the controllers in the nuclear power plant, causing a nuclear disaster, which we now are fully aware of. And the power plants are offline and off-grid, and that's to prevent sabotage. So the virus, someone had to physically enter the power plant and insert the virus in a little flash drive, a little USB stick, into a computer in that system, and it would have been an inspector or somebody who came to test things in the system or whatever, someone from outside. Well, it just so happened.
Is this a little like the Zionists sending over the Stuxnet virus to Iran?
Well, the U.S. made the Stuxnet virus. The CIA made it, but they used it. The foreshadowing event was in Iran last August, when the Stuxnet virus was introduced to their centrifuge plant, where they were enriching uranium, and Israel and the U.S. were screaming that they were making bombs, but they weren't. They were just making enriched uranium for fuel for their power plants, and that they were doing, it was completely legal. They had inspections, and it's in the treaties and all the conditions and contracts for when they set up the nuclear power plants to begin with. So they sent someone into the Natanz centrifuge facility. They put that little flash drive in a computer, and what it did was, this is how it works. The operators in the control room were in there watching all the dials in the computers and everything, and that virus makes the control room information look like everything's operating completely normally. But the virus actually goes into the target area, and it completely sabotages whatever they want to sabotage. So what it did was, it made the centrifuges go faster and faster until they were going so fast that they just flew apart. And so it destroyed, like, I don't know, 800 or 600 centrifuges in just a few moments. And the people in the control room never even knew it.
Oh, my goodness.
They were sitting there looking at the dials, and everything looked normal.
Wow.
So what happened...
And let me just stop here really quick. I've got to take a really quick break.
Okay.
I got to play a couple of ads, and I'm going to let you finish what you're saying. And if you'd like, I can open up the phone lines if you're up to taking a few callers.
Oh, I'm not through yet.
Okay. Yeah, you just let me know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
so
I can finish it pretty fast.
Okay, that's fine. Let me take a couple of breaks here, or a few ads, and we'll be right back. All right, guys. Leuren Moret, geoscientist, with us this evening on Freedomizer Radio. You're listening to Val Villano Show here, and lots of great information. I'm glad that you all came out, be a part of this show. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back. You're listening to the Val Villano Show right here on Freedomizer, and we have a special guest tonight, geoscientist Leuren Moret, for those of you just tuning in. And we're getting into some really intense topics here, discussing everything from HAARP, Fukushima, depleted uranium, and we're going to be opening up the phone lines here shortly, and that is your cue to call in, and you'll have an opportunity to ask Ms. Moret any question you'd like. So we're going to go ahead and turn this back over to Leuren. So go ahead and, I guess, start where you left off.
So I was talking about Natanz in Iran, and it was actually the Mossad, the Israeli secret police, or intelligence, who delivered that Stuxnet virus to the Natanz operating plant. Okay. And so Israel has been involved, but usually they deliver the virus. So we're going back to Fukushima now, and what happened is the Stuxnet virus showed up, period, last summer in about July. And then it was used in August in Iran, in the Natanz plant, and the MOX fuel, the mixed oxide uranium and plutonium fuel, was put into the Unit 3 reactor at Fukushima in September. In October, 63 computers in Japan were discovered to be infected with the Stuxnet virus. Now, about a month before the Fukushima earthquake, an Israeli security company that does security for Dimona, which is the Israeli nuclear weapons lab, they left, and they had put a new security system into Fukushima, the plant. So they are probably the ones who introduced the Stuxnet virus. And you can also introduce it with a laptop and a normal worm, that they put into computers too, a virus, just through a laptop. But so what happened is the earthquake happened, all of the power was cut off, they couldn't get any backup systems working because the Stuxnet virus was sabotaging the whole operating system. That's why they couldn't get anything to work. And as fast as they would correct the code in the operating system, the NSA in the U.S. would just change it back to the corrupted code from satellites. And so it was an impossible thing for them to get the cooling systems working. Within 90 minutes of the cooling system stopping, a nuclear power reactor goes into meltdown. And they never got the cooling systems working, and they've never gotten the cooling systems working because 6 hours after the earthquake, the fuel was so hot, it was almost 3,000 degrees centigrade, it was liquefying and dripping out of the bottom of the reactors, all of them.
And isn't it ironic? It was just, last week or just maybe 10 days ago, they finally officially announced that reactor number 1 is in full meltdown.
Oh, they've known this all along, and right. I just got a PowerPoint and a press release from TEPCO, which is the electricity company running Fukushima, and they admitted that reactor number 1 had lost all its fuel within 6 hours after the earthquake. So they've known the whole time. And so they started pumping water into these reactors, and the water just disappeared because it just went right through the holes in the bottom of the reactor because there was no fuel rods. They'd melted. And there's a really great movie, 46-minute documentary I just saw by a British company. They went to Chernobyl. They went into the shroud. They filmed the whole thing. They talked to Russian scientists who took them in. It was a horrifying film, and the same thing happened at Chernobyl. And you have to see that to understand the dimension of the problem, which is times 6 at Fukushima. Chernobyl had one small reactor. The reactors at Fukushima are the largest in the world. So so they've been in a situation where they were just pumping seawater in and making it horribly radioactive, nowhere to put it. So they were dumping it in the ocean. Then it's in the currents that carry it around the North Pacific and down along our coastline. It will completely poison Korea, the Aleutian Islands, Alaska, and then all the way down through Mexico, and then it will contaminate the Southern Pacific. But it also...
so what about physical? I don't know if I'm getting ahead of you, but I'm just edging at my seat here with this question. What kind of impact are we going to have physically? I mean, you
Well,
saw
that's what I'm trying
how
to get
potassium iodide has just flown off the table, off the shelf. Yeah, so
let me tell you.
I would love you
let me tell
to do
you.
that.
Let me tell you.
Go ahead.
Okay. So what happened is, first, what happened is in Unit 1, they started pouring the seawater on the reactors and the hot reactors, and it caused the water molecule, which is H2O, 1 hydrogen and 2 oxygen, to separate into hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. And that floated up and collected under the roof of the building until it got down to a point where the hot spent fuel rods in the pools on top of the reactors caused an ignition of both of those flammable gases and blew the roof off the building. And then a day or two later, Unit 3 with the plutonium fuel in it absolutely had a nuclear event. It wasn't just an explosion. It was a nuclear event, and it shot the spent fuel rods, which are as bad as nuclear bombs. They have the same fission products in them. And the assemblies that the rods are in, it just blew everything out of the building at 1,000 miles an hour, and the fuel rods were coming down 2 miles from the plant, all around the plant. And that created, both of those explosions created huge, huge amounts of radiation. And then Unit 2 blew up, and the hydrogen that had been forming in Unit 3 migrated through the pipes underground between the buildings and migrated into Unit 4 and blew that up. That was actually hydrogen from Unit 3 that made its way to Unit 4 that caused that explosion.
Oh, wow.
So as soon as Unit 3 blew up, and there's plutonium now all over Japan, there's plutonium all over the North Pacific, there's plutonium all over North America, and all over Korea and part of China, and now it's going all over the world. So when that happened, the USS Ronald Reagan was 150 miles offshore, and they contaminated all their planes and helicopters that were up in the air taking radiation readings, and they contaminated the ship. So they got the pilots to land, and they got out of there as fast as they could. But the whole ship is contaminated, and the men. So it's been downhill since. Now, why would they do that? Mm-hmm. They did that to bankrupt the Japanese farmers, contaminate all their farmland. Japan has to buy all their food now from the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers, who are growing food in India and paying Indian farmers.
Keep going. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. The Rothschilds have taken over parts of India. They're doing farming and paying Indian farmers $1 a day. And so they're going to be selling all the food to Japan. And the Rockefellers have huge plots in Mexico where they've been farming for decades. They will be selling all their food to the United States and probably Canada.
So Tier 2 is Tier 2. You mentioned earlier, those who control the food controls the country. Now
you
they
get
have
it.
destroyed Tier 2. Now they're going for number 3, which is the money.
Yeah, that's right. The food supply.
Oh.
So now in Hawaii, I have a graph from a German university monitoring station program, and the iodine, radioactive iodine, is highest in Japan, of course. The next highest is Hawaii, because all of that poison, the clouds and the currents, go in a gyre, a circle, out to Hawaii. And so they are more contaminated than we are, even though that poison went all the way up to Alaska and down our coastline before it went out to Hawaii. They have the highest rainfall in the world, so they got the highest levels of radiation. Now, what happened here in North America, it's so demonic, is that they used HAARP to create a high-pressure zone over eastern Canada, which included New York City and Washington, D.C. And I watched in these animated maps the plume from Fukushima came across the North Pacific, and it split into two plumes, and this is cold, dense air that's full of radioactivity, and it flowed around that high-pressure zone, protecting eastern Canada, Washington, D.C., and New York City, and it flowed over the Arctic and northern Canada into the Atlantic, and it poisoned Greenland and Iceland. And then when it got to Scandinavia, it turned left and went straight across Scandinavia into Russia. And so they targeted Scandinavia. They nuked Iceland because of the bank deals. Iceland refused to pay the debt on the bank heist. And the other part of the plume came down the Canadian and U.S. coast, and at the U.S. it turned and went east, straight across the whole country, but mostly towards the south, and polluted all of our food supplies in North America, and that means Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. The whole West Coast is where most of the produce and fruit and things like that are grown. So we're eating radioactive chard, radioactive lettuce, radioactive tomatoes, radioactive broccoli and strawberries. And I took a bag of chard last week out of my refrigerator. I live in Berkeley, California, and I stuck my Geiger counter in the bag, and the counts went up. So green leafy vegetables or broccoli, things that have a lot of places for raindrops to land and radioactive particles to stick to, are to be avoided for at least a year.
Okay.
And
good info there.
And the diseases we're going to see are exactly what happened after bomb testing. There are going to be huge increases. It's going to be subtle, and it's going to be slow. But all of our drinking water, irrigation water, if you have a water well, you're going to probably be okay. But if you don't have a water well, you should get a reverse osmosis filter, water filter that you put on the water coming into your house, and that filters out most of a lot of the nasty radionuclides. But people don't realize there are more than 1,300 radioactive isotopes that are coming in the clouds and the plumes and down in the rain, right onto our hair and our skin and into our on our clothes and our umbrella and our boots, and we walk in the house and contaminate the house. So people have to be very, very careful, and especially about what they eat. Miso soup, which is very, very good for people who are dealing with radiation exposure, and also root vegetables, because you can scrub the root vegetables, cut the top off, and if you boil the water, put them in boiling water and then pour it off after it's boiled a couple minutes, that removes a lot of the radionuclides that are just sticking on the outside. And the dairy products, no one should be eating any dairy products in the U.S. for a year. That is the number one no-no. Drinking water and dairy products are the two main pathways for radiation coming into your body. We will see a very large decline in fertility in the U.S. We've already had a big decline. It's going to get bigger. And sterility in men and in women, and it will be younger and younger people. There is going to be an increase in pathway cancers. This is the pathways that the radiation comes into our bodies. The most dangerous is inhalation. The particles go in our lungs, and they go right into the lipids and cholesterol in the blood, and they're carried all over and filtered out in the tissues everywhere in the body. There's nowhere that doesn't get nuked. There will be chronic illnesses increase like diabetes, arterial sclerosis, heart disease, brain disease, Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig's, Hodgkin's, Alzheimer's disease. We're going to see large increases, for instance, in the diseases that are caused by damage to the immune system. And damage to the immune system also promotes HIV and mycoplasma. So there are going to be quite a lot of chronic inflammatory diseases. We're going to see a lot of this, and a decline in the SAT scores, in the intelligence quotient of people all over America and our students who are the future of our country. Because a society survives on the power of its ideas. And just from bomb testing between 1952 and 1963, the average SAT scores for the whole United States declined 12%. And not only that, it never recovered because they started the nuclear power plants, which release emissions that replace the nuclear bomb test fallout. And on top of that, I was talking about the SAT scores. On top of that, the World Health Organization did a World Mental Health Survey about 5 years ago, and reported that the percentage of the Japanese population with some form of mental illness is 9.8%. In Russia, in the Ukraine around Chernobyl, the percentage of the population with some form of mental illness is about 18 to 20%, but the U.S. has an average rate of mental illness in this country of over 300 million people. It's over 26%. So, Val, you look around, and every 4 people that you see, there's one case of some form of mental illness.
Wow. Wow. Well, this is just absolutely fascinating and very educational. Do you mind if I open the phone lines now? We've got people itching here.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm
okay.
itching too. I want to talk to those people.
Okay, so call-in number, that's your cue, callers, 347-324. 3704, press number 1 will get you on to the air, and you can have a chance to ask our guests here any question you'd like. We're going to go ahead and take our first caller, and this is actually going to be sitting in as my co-host for the remainder of the show. Hottie, go ahead, honey.
Yes, hi. I was wondering, my sister-in-law, she's pregnant, and what should she do? She lives in California, and what should she do to protect herself and the baby?
Where does she live?
In L.A.
Oh, God. Okay. She needs to be taking iodine, and you can get it from a health food store or an herbal shop. Just go in and ask for seaweed. There's a seaweed called Irish moss, which is dried, and it looks like kind of like tea leaves. And you put a teaspoon of that in a teapot and hot water, and you drink a cup of that every day. Or you can get iodine droplets, or you can buy tincture of iodine, which is in the little bottle with the dropper in it, and that's what we put on children's cuts. That's like only $2.50. So you wipe that on your skin, like on your stomach, or for the first week you want to flood your thyroid with it. So you wipe it on the skin, on your neck, between your Adam's apple and your collarbone. That's where the thyroid wraps around the esophagus. There's also a 10% iodine ointment called Povidone, Povidone, Povidone iodine ointment. P-O-V-I-D-O-N-E. Just go into your pharmacist and ask him to order you a couple of tubes, and it will last a long time. You just rub that on your stomach or on your skin anywhere, and the iodine goes right through the skin into the body and ends up in the thyroid. But also, every cell in our body utilizes iodine. And the iodine level in Americans in the last 30 years has dropped 50%, and that's one of the reasons, because I noticed when I started taking it, I wasn't hungry anymore. That's what is making Americans eat all the time. It's because they're not getting the nutrition they need, and iodine is essential to cell function. So those are very important things to do. She should not ingest any dairy products at all. She must drink distilled water if she does not have a reverse osmosis filter on her water system. And she should be very, very, very careful and not eat fruits and vegetables unless she can peel them.
Okay. And how about for the babies? Because she has babies too, my niece and nephew. Do we do the same thing to them?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And what I did when I had a baby, I did it just because I didn't want to buy baby food I didn't know what was in it. So I just made the baby food, and I just got yams and potatoes and carrots and turnips, things like that. And I boiled them together in water, and she should use distilled water for that. And then I just put them in a blender and poured that into ice cube trays. And whenever my baby was going to eat, I'd take 1 or 2 ice cubes out and let them just defrost. And I'd warm them up a little bit and feed the baby. And it also saves a lot of money. The baby's much healthier. You know what it's eating. And that's a very, very nutritious diet. Also, if you want to eat dairy products, if you cannot live without them, they have to be from the southern hemisphere. So you should buy butter and cheese from New Zealand or Australia or Tasmania. Southern hemisphere.
So what about our local farmers markets and things like that? If we're on the West Coast?
It's all contaminated. The whole food supply for the whole North America is contaminated, all of it. And it's all deliberate, and it's the Rockefellers who own GE and Westinghouse, and it's GE and the Department of Energy and British Petroleum who are running this whole Fukushima disaster for the benefit of the Queen of England, which is the Crown, or the royal family, and the Crown is the City of London, the bankers, international financiers, and the Wall Street financiers. They're all in cahoots together, and they did it on purpose, deliberate. There's no way to deny it. I have all the evidence.
Wow.
That's how they've run this world. That's how they've always run this world. That's how they're going to continue running it. But the horrific thing is that the technologies are so horrific now that we're living under a totalitarian scientific oligarchy or a totalitarian scientific ruling class. That's reality. That's what's happening now. It's real simple.
Right. Hey, so
it's just the Wizard of Oz with harp now behind a curtain.
Oh my goodness! He just put that picture in my head.
That's what's going on, and people say to me, "Well, I hear this all the time." But don't they know they're doing that to themselves? They don't care. They don't care if they kill their children. They don't care if they kill their wives and husbands. I worked in a nuclear weapons lab. Those people were insane. The husband was dragging around oxygen tank and was full of cancer. His wife was sitting in the living room with markers painted on her head where she had to go in for brain tumor, radiation treatment. and their children were dying of leukemia, but that guy went to work every day at the lab. He was addicted to it. Actually, they're addicted to the paycheck is what they're addicted to.
Hey, I have a question in the chat room. This is coming from Terry Lynn. She'd like to know, she lives in Florida and she's growing her own veggies. Are they safe to eat, and should she start a greenhouse in her garage?
Everybody should have a greenhouse. Everybody should have a greenhouse in their backyard if they can.
Because it's safe as far as from the air and things like that.
Because the rain, I'll tell you what causes the radiation exposure. It depends on weather, and that means rain and snow, and it depends on geography. So if you're living along coastal areas, you're probably going to get a lot of radiation because of the fog and the rain and the winds bringing it in, and it washes up on the shoreline. Now, for North America, in about 2 years, a gigantic island, 40 miles in diameter, of trash from the tsunami, and these are whole houses that are floating out there in the Pacific, and cars and trucks bobbing in the water, they're all contaminated with radiation. In 2 years, they will be washing up on all of the beaches of North America.
Okay. All right, I've got another caller here. I'm going to take this caller from the 574 area code. Caller, hey, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks.
Hi.
Leuren, I have a question, something I've been thinking about lately. I have Graves' disease, so I have had my thyroid removed, and I wondered, I can't take iodine pills, isn't going to do any good. Where is it going to accumulate in my body, or what can I do to prevent anything?
You should still be taking iodine because iodine is utilized by every cell in your body.
Okay.
And how old are you?
60.
60. So you went through the nuclear bomb test. That's why you don't have a thyroid now. The nuclear bomb test in Nevada caused Graves' disease.
Okay. I know many of my friends are living on the Synthroid the same way I am. We don't have any
what
thyroid.
What state are you in?
I'm in Indiana. Indiana.
Yeah, that's why. There's a great map of the rain out and snow out of all those bomb tests of the United States. It's all black. It looks like a Rorschach test. Everybody in the U.S. was exposed. Everyone who lived in the continental U.S. was exposed between 1952 and 63. Every single person.
So where would the damage accumulate in me? Just any organ? Since I don't have a thyroid, what would be the next organ that would go to?
Well, if you don't have your cells protected with an excess of normal iodine, the radioactive iodine will be damaging your cells. And I can't predict, nobody can predict where the radiation will affect you. I don't know your health history of your family. That's inherited. I don't know what other diseases you've had that already have weakened your body, but you might also be lucky. You might not. You might be just fine.
Yeah. Well, I was just wondering, since everybody talks about taking the iodine for for the thyroid, and if you don't have one, then what? But you say still take it, huh?
Yeah, because your every cell in your body uses iodine. Everybody should be taking iodine, especially babies and children. You could just rub it on the baby's skin, just a couple dabs every day. The children and the babies and pregnant women are the most important to protect. And also the elderly will be affected. So more people would be affected in the very young age group and the very old. So they're shaving off the population on both sides. The people in their 20s to 60s are pretty healthy. It's going to be the very young and the very old who really bear the brunt of the effects of radiation exposure.
But this is way worse than the testing they did, right?
Oh my God, this is many times Chernobyl.
Well, that's
many times.
Yeah, but many times even the testing that they did that we were exposed to as kids.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're talking 6 nuclear plants,
yeah,
you're talking a lot.
They did 1,300 nuclear bomb tests at Nevada, so they pretty much poisoned a lot of America. But the amount of fission products in those fuel rods, there are 600,000 fuel rods in 7 cooling ponds, and one reactor, which had the cooling ponds on top of the reactor, blew sky high. So that is thousands of spent fuel rods that blew up in the air and burned up, and we don't even know where they are.
Well,
Plus,
I'm sure they got into our jet stream, so they've probably covered the whole United States.
Well, the jet stream's better because that carries it very high up into the upper atmosphere, and only 85% of the nuclear bomb test material, only 15% actually got down to our environment. 85% is still up there. But with this stuff down on the ground, going up at a very low altitude and coming across the Pacific Ocean, it's almost 95% is going to be rained out in 2.5 months. So it is much, much worse than nuclear bomb tests, period.
So I want to stay in the house.
And the problem is we're shooting depleted uranium and bombing with depleted uranium all over the Middle East and Central Asia. And I graphed the uranium in the L.A. drinking water. It's sky high, and you can see every battle in Iraq and Afghanistan and Yugoslavia in the L.A. drinking water. And what it's doing is it's causing the males to disappear and the females to expand in the population. And this is true in fish studies. In fact, offshore from San Onofre nuclear power plant in Southern California and Diablo Canyon, which is between San Francisco and L.A., the male fish that hatch in that radioactive contaminated water, or they are born alive, they change sex to females. And that's happening in the human population. I saw that in Portland. My God, there were women who were half male, and there were men who were half female. It's the feminization of males. There were women with beards and mustaches, and there were women with male bodies, their musculature and the shape of their bodies and their faces and their deep voices. That's what's happening.
It's almost like sexual mutations. Hey, listen, I've got a couple
They want to do that. They want to do that.
Yeah.
What?
I have a couple of questions in the chat room. I don't want to get too far behind because we've got
well, I do appreciate the time taken to talk to me. I do appreciate the information. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so I've got 2 questions in the chat room. The first one I'll ask because the second one is pretty complex. So the first question is coming from a Marine veteran. He wants to know if there is any test he can take at the VA to find out if he was exposed to depleted uranium in Iraq.
Well, Semper Fi, I was born at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. My dad was a Marine, and all my brothers and my sister were born on military bases. So good evening, and you will not get a test at the VA. They're going to lie to you. That's why I got 57 depleted uranium bills in state legislatures, because I went to the legislators and I went to the veterans and I said, all of the cost of the health care is going to be passed on to the states, and it's going to bankrupt the state, county, and city health care facilities, so you better pass these bills. And boy, did they sit up and do it. So what the best thing for you to do is to contact Major Doug Rocke, R-O-K-K-E, and you can email him. The email is D as in Doug, L as in Linda, I as in Inez, D as in Doug, the number 4, the number 9, at AOL.com. And so did you ask him if he got that number, that email?
Okay, let's do it one more time. I'm going to put it actually into the chat room. Okay, one more time.
Okay.
D.
Okay. D as in Doug, L as in Linda, I as in Ima, N as in, N as in Nancy, D as in Doug, the number 4, the number 9, at AOL.com.
Okay, I got that in there. DLIND49 at AOL.com. There you go.
That's it.
Okay, perfect.
Now, Doug is a retired Major Doug Rocky. He's a physicist. He was in charge of the depleted uranium cleanup program after Gulf War I, and he has helped more people, more soldiers. He's dying from depleted uranium exposure himself, and he's been really, really effective helping soldiers get care. Now, what the young man can do also is to take a sample of his hair, and it cannot be dyed or altered with chemicals. So if he can't take it out of his head, if he's had a permanent or hair treatment or dye, he needs to take it from somewhere else on his body that hasn't been treated, and send it to. You can do it through the internet. You can send it to a laboratory, and what you want to do is in the panel of metals that they're testing for, you want to tell them to include uranium. They need to test for uranium. And that is the best way to do it. It's about $100 for the test. Look for it on the internet, and they will send you a package or a box, or they will tell you how to get it to them.
Is his fatty liver disease possibly connected?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
He just asked that
I'm
too.
sorry. Yeah, I haven't heard of that before, and no one's asked me that before.
Okay, we have a really quick announcement here. It looks like we're going to run to the top of the hour. We've got a lot of people on the phone lines. I see you there, but you got to press number 1 so your hand raises on my switchboard, so I know that you want to come on. Otherwise, we have a lot of people who actually just call in who may be listening to cell phone and just wanting to listen. So if you want to come on to the air here to ask Leuren a question, please press the number 1 at any time, and that will cue me to let me know to bring you on. Okay, so the next question, which seems to be a little more complicated, and that is, this is coming from, let's see, I got to scroll up, find, sorry, I've got a full house here. Basically, the question was, what do you know about scientists who they seem to round up, okay, sorry, I'm reading. I would like to ask the guest about scientists that get rounded up by them. Seems as though we have too many scientists ending up murdered and missing, many high-profile ones too. And what do you make of that, and are you having any complications yourself?
Yeah, I've had death threats and assassination threats and attempts and all kinds of things like that. When you're a whistleblower, it's always much more difficult for the rest of your life. But actually, I am having a much more fun than when I was doing everything right. So, so instead of watching a spy movie, I'm in the spy movie now.
Okay.
and so being, oh gosh, I forgot the question. What was the question?
Basically, he wanted to know if you, obviously, I mean, there's a lot of
all the
people
dead
out there.
scientists. Yeah.
Or even the whistleblowers, they come up missing, they come up dead, I mean, there's so many stories.
Murder Inc. is real busy in around scientists. What has happened is that scientists who produce these weapons and technologies and killer bacteria and killer viruses and everything, they are used to produce these technologies by the ruling elite or the military. And as soon as they produce them, they're murdered. And that is so they can't undo that virus or that technology. And it's also so that they can't pass that technology on to any other country or any other entity. And so since 9/11, 2001, something like 60 to 80 world-class microbiologists have been murdered. And most of them were in the U.S., a few of them were in England, and one or two were in Australia. So that's the British Empire developing bioweapons to use on populations to depopulate areas and regions where, for instance, there's a lot of minerals or timber that they want to loot. This is all about land grabs and stealing minerals and resources. And what I learned at Berkeley, I was an environmental commissioner for 8 years, and so the Lawrence Berkeley Lab and the University of California at Berkeley had to come to our commission and tell us of any new projects. And so one project was the new nanotechnology project called the Molecular Foundry. And they did their presentation, and I was asking them questions, and I suddenly realized that that they're developing binary and trinary biological weapons so that they're in 3 parts or 2 parts. So they introduce one part that is not harmful to people, and at another time they introduce the other part and they interact in a lethal way and nobody even knows.
Right.
The other very, very dangerous weapon is ethnic-specific bioweapons. And I learned about this on the Indian reservations where teams from the government were coming around and saying, we want a cheek swab from your mouth to help you with diabetes. And there were Indians who were pretty savvy warning Indian tribes not to do that because they were actually, the government was collecting their DNA to make ethnic-specific bioweapons. And they even have been testing spermicidal corn in Mexico. When the men eat it, they don't produce viable sperm, and so you have a much lower birth rate. That's another way to prevent an increase in the population. Depopulation, that's birth control. Depopulation is when you just plain kill people.
Right. All right, we've got another caller. Looks like we've got a caller from the Gulf of Mississippi, 228. You're on.
Hi, Leuren. I have a question about the fast-breeding reactors, and I just learned that if they were doing fast-breeding plutonium, they would have a uranium blanket around the reactor. Do you think they had that, and does that make a difference in the radiation?
Well, none of these are safe. All of the reactors are just spewing solid, liquid, and gaseous radiation every single day out of those big stacks, the big towers.
Yeah.
They're just blowing that all up into the air, and it's in your house in a couple hours, and it sticks to the house dust, and then people inhale it. And it's radioactive iodine. It's 1,300 radioactive isotopes in your living room, in your children's bedroom, in the attic, out in the yard, and you don't even know you're inhaling it. So 2/3 of all breast cancer deaths in the United States between 1985 and 89, that's the only data we looked at from the Centers for Disease Control, because it's got to be true everywhere, is that the 2/3 of all breast cancer deaths occurred within 100 miles of reactors in the United States. So they were nuclear power plant reactors, or they were nuclear weapons labs reactors.
Yeah, I love your presentations. You've taught me a lot already. I'm getting a crash course in all this nuclear stuff.
Well, everybody needs to know.
I know. We re-upload your videos everywhere.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. I'm just, I'm just a citizen scientist. I'm trying to warn people, to educate people, to empower people, and I'm giving people the big picture because they have a lot of the pieces to the puzzle, but they don't have the framework to put it in to be able to relate all those puzzle pieces. And that's how the ruling elite have always fooled us. They compartmentalize the information. So people instinctively know that what I'm saying is correct, and they know it's true. As crazy and bizarre and frightening as it sounds, it's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah, I know. Did you hear that Japan got proof about HAARP? They set up all the earthquake facilities around, testing facilities, and they found that the ionosphere was heated with radio waves before the earthquake, and the electron count went way up and stuff like that. I just got that.
That's correct. That's correct. And the Japanese are better scientists even than American scientists. And I saw the data printout from the Japanese magnetometer. It measures these radio waves, these special ELF waves that are transmitted. Yeah. And they knew it when it happened.
A lot of us did who know about it.
Yeah.
And
what do you think happened in? What do you think Katrina was? That was HAARP.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't want to learn that. I didn't want to learn that. That's too close to home. I know it now, but it was one of the last things. I learned that from Old Bow's show, too, but I wouldn't listen. That's the night I heard it.
Yeah. Okay.
But, we still have Corexit down here, too, so they're mixing everything.
Oh, well, you see, I didn't talk about that. What they've done, they have poisoned the Gulf region and the East Coast and the East Coast with a chemical, a horrible, nasty chemical, and it's everywhere, and in the food and in the rain, everywhere. And now the radiation that is coming, we're getting much heavier radiation on the West Coast because they are making military rainstorms that last for 2 weeks. And that rained the most part of the radiation that came over the U.S. out in the western part of the U.S., actually western North America. But you're farther, so you're going to get less radiation. So they had to give you...
It hasn't rained for a while either. I thought maybe they were protecting their facilities or something.
And no, you'll get it. And no, they're waiting to mix the radiation and the chemicals together. And then that multiplies the effects of each other. So you're going to get chemical and radiation poisoning that is going to be as devastating as the high levels of radiation we're getting on the West Coast. It's all depopulation. It's poisoning all of the food supply. It's
but it's
taking
slow and it's
down
hard to
America.
Because it's so slow, it's hard to get people to listen and believe you.
Oh, who cares? I don't care if anybody believes me or not. That's too late for
my
that.
Family. I want them to protect, and my family, I want them to protect their kids.
Oh, they're always the worst. What they do is what they see you do. So don't talk to them at all. Go and work on the neighbors and people who listen and college students. Get them to help. Hand out flyers and stuff at the grocery store. Get more women to come and help you. Listen, women have all the power. They have all the power. And in 1963, when they were tired of their babies dying from radiation from bomb testing, it was little old ladies in tennis shoes with gray hair and baby buggies who surrounded the White House. And that's what ended bomb testing.
Okay.
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
sorry there.
That's
Thank
okay.
you so much, caller. Okay. Listen, we've got a lot of people on the switchboard here, a lot of callers. Again, I won't pick your call up unless your hand is up, and by doing that, you need to press 1. We've only got about 12 minutes, 13 minutes left, and False Flag Radio is coming in. By the way, I'm supposed to plug it. It is the most horrible night show on BTR. Okay. I had to do my skit there for False Flag. Actually, they have a lot of fun, so stick around after this. We've got False Flag Radio coming in, so don't go anywhere. Okay, so it looks like we've got a lot of callers, but nobody's seeming to, so we're okay. So is there anything you wanted to add at this point? To wrap this up, we've got about 10 minutes or so left.
Oh, does anybody else have questions?
I'm looking right now.
I do. I do, Leuren.
Okay,
I
go
have
ahead.
a question. Yes, I have an autoimmune disease, and will the radiation affect that, like, more so?
Well, it's going to affect all of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to affect all of us in different ways. So we cannot be afraid. We cannot have our lives controlled with fear. We need to go on with our daily routines, with our social interactions. We need to be happy and to just go on living our lives. But we also have to be aware of what is happening and the danger here. And it's going to be very difficult for the United States. It's going to really damage us. But not everyone will be damaged. It will be very sort of invisible. I mean, we didn't notice it that much from nuclear bomb testing. Some people did, but no one knew. Very few people know the facts that the SAT scores for the whole country declined 12%, or that 26%, more than 26% of Americans have some form of mental illness. So it'll be in very subtle ways, and it'll be slow.
Mm-hmm. So we're all
But you mustn't live in fear. Just be careful about what you eat and stay away from dairy products, and be sure you're drinking either well water or distilled water. I
do.
Yeah, that's good. And so the water supply and avoiding dairy products, and right now don't eat green leafy vegetables. Try to eat root vegetables and sort of scrub them or peel them, and just stay away from lettuce and spinach and cauliflower and broccoli, plants that grow outside. And if you can make a greenhouse, that is a much safer way to have control of your food supply and protect yourself and your family. Mm-hmm. And children love gardening.
Gardening, I absolutely love gardening myself. I have a comment for you. Guest 2429 says, Leuren does wonderful work. Leuren, sorry. Talking to the legislatures, bringing awareness to this public. Thanks so much, Leuren. So that's coming out of guest 2429 to you.
Well, that's very sweet, and it's very much appreciated. And, I grew up in the Marine Corps, and I went to a different school every year, 10 schools in 12 years. And I really didn't know where I was or who I was, or I just thought moving every year was what was normal. And so when I moved to the Bay Area, I got involved with communities, but I didn't know how to be involved with them. And I started collecting baby teeth to measure the radiation in them in a black community in San Francisco, south of San Francisco, called Hunters Point. And it's built at the Hunters Point Naval Shipyard, and that whole neighborhood is completely contaminated with radiation from Navy activities. And so I wanted to collect baby teeth there, and I was just desperate to meet people and get some baby teeth. And I didn't know how to do it, so I wrote a letter for the newspaper because I couldn't get any journalists to do a story. And the letter got published, and then pretty soon I was writing articles, and they published everything I wrote, and they loved everything I wrote, and they went to prisoners in prisons, and they went to people who hadn't even graduated from high school, and pretty soon what is she called? The editor said, you know, you're their favorite writer. She said there are women here walking around. They didn't even go to high school, and they're saying, well, you know, breast cancer is not the only disease caused by ionizing radiation. It's diabetes, arterial sclerosis, brain disease, heart disease, asthma. And so she said, you have really done a service to the community. You've really educated them.
Wow. That's awesome.
And I'm
you know
only
what?
doing it. I'm only doing it for hugs and kisses.
Well, you know
when
what,
I get
Leuren?
a hug or a kiss, I think I'm really rewarded.
Well, I'm sending you a virtual hug and a big kiss because this has been an absolutely mind-riveting interview, and it's just such an honor to make your acquaintance, and hopefully we can get together soon again. I've learned so much from you, and followed a lot of your presentations on YouTube. For those out there who would like to know more about her work, you can actually go to YouTube and just type her name in, and you'll come up with all kinds of stuff, and very knowledgeable, and, you know, I'm just really, really pleased that we were able, and by the way, job well done because you stuck through it. You know, I know you weren't feeling good earlier, and it just seems that we were able to get it done, and it's been an awesome night.
Thank you. You know, I'm just talking to people like I'm a really good friend. I paid a very high price for doing this, but I think I'm very blessed to be the one chosen to do this. And it's one of the most interesting, the most rewarding, the most satisfying things I've ever done in my life. It's serving humanity. And I'm not afraid of anything. I trust the universe, and I trust myself now, and everything comes to me, and the right people come to me. And so when we get centered in a spiritual center, and we work on that spiritual power, everything is fine. And I want people to do that and think about that with this disaster, because that is what will get us through it. And that is the very thing they're attacking with HAARP. It's our spirituality.
Leuren, there's a shout-out from the Marine that we just addressed earlier. He says, tell Leuren, hoorah, Semper Fi style, thanks for all the information on behalf of my family and friends. Thank you, hand salute.
Oh, that's really sweet. And he can actually call me. My phone number is, you can put this on the chat board, 510, area code 510-845-3139. And I will put him in touch with Doug Rocky. I'll give him his phone number, and I'd like to just say hi to him and thank you.
Thank you. That's my brother. Yeah.
What's his name?
Right.
Do you know what his name is?
Yes, this is my brother. It's Jonathan.
Jonathan. Oh, great. Okay, tell Jonathan to call me.
Okay.
All right. So there again, 510-845-3139, and that is Leuren's phone number if you'd like to speak with her personally. Okay, we've got about...
Berkeley, California. Yes.
Berkeley, California. Yes. So we've got about 3 minutes here. Do you want to do a last statement here? Take about 1 to 2 minutes, and then I'll close the show down. And
sure.
False Flag Radio is coming up next. Go ahead.
Yes, and what we need to do now, the correct thing to do, the right thing to do, the wise thing to do is to recreate our communities, to become reconnected socially. And it's people helping each other and sharing what they have, resources they have, and ideas and natural herbal treatments that cure illnesses, go and talk to a Hispanic, a Mexican, or an Asian, or an indigenous person, a Native American, and ask them what their traditional cures are for diseases. They have a cure for diabetes. Every tribe I've talked to around the world has had a natural herb or a root bark from a special plant. They make a tea out of it and drink it once a day, and they don't have diabetes. That's where the best medicine is. It's right in our backyard.
All right, all right. Awesome closing statement there, Leuren. My hat off to you, and if we ever get a chance, if I get down there, I'd love to get coffee with you sometime or something just to chat with you. You're an awesome person. Keep up the courageous work, my dear sister. You are doing a servitude for humanity, and that is much to be applauded. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.